Good morning. My name is Christian Grønning, and on behalf of the Danish Marketing Association, I would like to welcome you to this final M-Talk session of 2020. Today's M-Talk will cover the topic future business models in a post-COVID and a post-purpose era, presenting three true Nordic purpose pioneers for the next hour. And that is Thomas Kolster, Ingmar Rentzhog, and Mathias Wikstrom. We'll start with a 15 minutes talk from the Danish branding guru and author behind Goodvertising and his latest book, The Hero Trap. After Thomas, we are very lucky to have the founder of the world's largest social network for climate change, and also actually the man behind Greta Thunberg's climate campaigns. And his name is Ingmar Rentzhog, joining in from Stockholm for 15 minutes. Also from Stockholm, we are lucky to have Mathias Wikstrom, who's the CEO of the super exciting Swedish fintech startup company called Doconomy. We'll wrap up with a Q&A session in the last 10 minutes or so of this webinar, including questions from you, and you are very welcome to chat. Write your questions in the chat below, and we will try our best to sum up and include your questions in the Q&A as well. The Q&A is moderated by Thomas Kolster today, who will join me in the studio now in a bit. The next hour is all about getting purpose right and creating new business models that makes a true impact in people's lives and also for the planet. So, Thomas, would you join me in the studio? The stage is yours.
For sure, I will. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. And good morning, everyone. Hope you are staying safe and healthy in these extremely challenging times. And I'm very happy to be here today. So thank you to Dansk Markedsføring. I'm also very happy to actually very soon to be joined by Mathias and Ingmar, some true people who's doing a lot of exciting stuff. Obviously, these are challenging times for all of us in marketing. And for those of you who know me, I have been writing a book called Goodvertising for about a decade ago that obviously talked about purpose. But I think this specific time is really an opportunity to rethink what is meaningful growth. How do we cross this post-pandemic time? And for me, there was a need to write a new book because as a staunch believer in purpose, I was seeing the cracks in the ceiling, because most brands today, when they do purpose, it looks a little bit like this. Brands being incredibly busy about talking about all the good stuff they're doing, incredibly busy about showcasing their efforts. I think today in the Nordics, you can barely not go into a supermarket without them talking about things like food waste, ocean plastics. And for me, the big challenge in that is, in fact, that when you put yourself up on that purpose pedestal, you are going to fall down. And sorry for the little analogy here, but I think it's a good little refreshing thing. Imagine I go into a bar, I kick open the door, and I'm scream, "I'm the world's best lover." At some point, somebody at that bar is going to find out you're not. And the same thing is very, very true about purpose. Because quite often, people in the purpose space say we can outcry or we can outdo each other. And it becomes this almost pledge marathon, which doesn't really work. I mean, let's say I come back from this little session here today and I take my girlfriend in being unfaithful. You know, not a good thing. You know, she's caught and she says, "Thomas, I'm very, very sorry." But she also says, "You know what? Towards 2030, I'm going to be a little bit less unfaithful until back in 2030, we're back together." Would we accept that? No, we wouldn't. And I think the challenge is, in fact, that so often when we deal with purpose, it becomes self-glorifying and navel-gazing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we drive action? How do we create meaningful growth? And as somebody who's been in the purpose space for quite some time, quite often we look to pioneers like Patagonia. And when you listen to what Patagonia is saying, we're in the business to save our home planet. Again, sounds a very big, bold, navel-gazing statement. And when you come out with statements like that, for sure, you're going to fail. I mean, look at what we see from Danish companies today. Take a company like Danish Crown. They talk about feeding the world. I mean, for Christ's sake, they're doing meat. I mean, you know, is that what we're going to do? And the problem, in fact, is that people are becoming increasingly skeptical about all these do-good messages. So for my first book up until today, what I'm seeing is that skepticism. People are basically not believing what you guys are saying. Secondly, there does seem to exist a gap between what people say they want to buy. So they say we want to buy from purposeful companies, value-driven companies. But what it shows us is that actually only about 26% follow through. So this is a survey from the US, and it shows a gap of 39% of people. This gap between intent and action. And this is exactly also why we might need to take a hard new look at purpose to understand how can we drive that change. And maybe it's not so curious. I mean, we're getting closer to New Year's, and I don't know how many of you on this live stream who does New Year's pledges. This is a good opportunity to think about your New Year's pledge. And what often tends to happen with New Year's pledges is that they're quite often just the beginning to bad old habits. I'm going to be honest with you. You know, a couple of weeks into January, I might have promised, you know, I want to lose a few kilos, but yes, the running shoes are lying still in the corridor. So the thing I was doing with the hero trap was in fact saying, how do we avoid the hero trap? What is it that we do wrong? Why aren't people following through? And one of the companies that I interviewed for the book was in fact a Danish company that I'm sure all of you know on this little live stream, Årstiderne. I spoke with the CEO, Søren Ejlersen. And the interesting thing about Årstiderne is in fact that they don't talk about, we are going to do this and that. They talk about earth connection, which is something that you have to discover yourself. So basically, they're not really selling the produce, the what they're selling is basically this thing that I get in touch with plant-based cooking, I get in touch with cooking, I get in touch with the produce. And when talking with Søren, he talked very much about that transformation. So when every company is claiming to have a higher purpose, it's extremely difficult to win in that marketplace. And the development that I'm seeing right now, and we don't really have to look at the first two ones when we're talking about functional benefits and emotional benefits, but I'm going to talk about this one here. I'm going to talk about societal benefits. And this was in fact where my first book, Goodvertising, was at. At the time, it did make sense. Purpose was a differentiating thing. It was something that rallied. It was something that drew employees to your burning purpose. Because it was brands like Dove, Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia. But when everybody's claiming to have this higher why, it's in fact much more about the delivery, what I can feel. It's about the transformation. So it's moving from being a more environmentally friendly car to talking about what's actually in it for me. This idea about being a conscious traveler. So what I did was I wanted to reframe the purpose discussion, and I set out a tool with a different question. I know we in marketing love Simon Sinek at Start With Why, which is a navel-gazing exercise. But think if you lose your keys, if you lose the keys to meaning, you might be looking inside the house, inside the company. But in fact, where I think we need to be looking at is in the relationship with people. So I created this model called the Arrow, which is inspired by psychotherapy and coaching. And it asks four fundamental questions. The first one is, what is it that you do? And this obviously might be the product or the service. This shouldn't give you too much of a headache. I mean, it's not necessarily a constant. If you are Apple, you might be going from laptop to streaming services. The second question is, how are you unique in delivering your products and services? Again, this might be you're more convenient or whatever it might be. The important question here is not about the why, because that's inside out, but outside in. Who can you help become? Who can you help people become? How can you help people on their journey towards change? And I think this is the true driver, not talking about your values and your vision, because everybody is screaming up about that. But actually, how do you translate that into something that matters in my life? The fourth question is when. So when do you enable this change? How can you push people towards the change that they want to see in their lives? As I talked about with the New Year's pledges, right? How can brands help you achieve that? And one of the questions that provoked me to write the second book was, in fact, one simple question. What brand or what leader have really truly created a meaningful difference in your life? Because if you can't answer that question, are you really then truly delivering on your purpose? The outcome of this, I don't call a purpose, because I think purpose is a word that's too good and too broad for its own good. Often it ends up with, do good for people and planet. It ends up with whatever in the boardroom or whatever in the marketing department can agree on, the lowest common denominator. But for me, a transformative promise needs to be a North Star that guides you towards the change that you want to enable, because else purpose quickly ends up being a two-headed purpose monster. So one company that got this right is a health insurance company called Discovery. They came out of South Africa and is now in 7 markets. Their transformative promise to all of us is incentivizing people to live healthier. So compare that with the thing that Patagonia was saying. We're in the business to save our home planet. So this is 2 fundamentally different ways of looking at leadership. And they've been extremely successful and innovative in getting their customers to live healthier, in delivering on that promise. One of the things they have is a program called Vitality. And Vitality rewards, it's a classic reward program, but Vitality rewards people for example, shopping healthier fruits and vegetables, for going to the gym. And they did a survey with more than 400,000 people, comparing those who took part in the program with those who didn't. And they were successful at getting people to exercise 4.9 days more per month. So think about how successful they've been at bridging that gap, the 39% between intent and action. And the good thing about when you have your whole organization thinking about how can you incentivize people to live healthier, new innovations come out of it, and you avoid the two-headed purpose monster where one head says purpose, 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 and one says profit, because they've also been successful at cutting down the hospitalization cost with about 30%. So as I said, 2 ways of looking at leadership. One way is pitching yourself as the driver of change. We as a brand, we as a leader are the one that creates the change. The second one is really looking at your own ability to create change. And yet so often I hear, people refer to the Have as Meaningful Brand Service that says, 70 to 80% plus of people want brands to solve some of society's biggest challenges. But in fact, an emerging survey from Cone Communication does show that young people today see themselves much more as the change agents, the sort of Greta Thunberg generation. So obviously I wanted to understand, does this really change actions? Does this really change behaviors? Moving from the sort of preacher type purposes that we see from a lot of organizations to the sort of enabling promise. So I wanted to compare 2 sorts of commercial. The classic purposeful commercial, this is one that was shown at Super Bowl last year, where Budweiser talk about this, but for better tomorrow. Kind of classical purpose communication, talking about how the beers are now brewed with wind energy or offset, the rest is offset with carbon emissions. Compare that with a different commercial, the Always Like a Girl commercial. I'm sure that most of you know that commercial, where they talk about you are incredible, you are unstoppable. It's about kind of changing and giving young girls the confidence. And when we compare those 2 approaches, it is pretty clear that on brand warmth and on competence, they're pretty much on par. The one that has the underline there are the transformative ones, and the ones without the underline are the classic purposeful ones. So even though the brand is not talking about how great, how world-bettering it is, people still think it's competent. But where it becomes super, super interesting is, in fact, when you look at motivation. Because when you look at motivation, you can see a plateau of the transformative campaigns, and people on average feel 29.5% more motivated when you put people in charge. And I think this is exactly the pivot that we're seeing right now. This move from purpose being about companies shouting about the world-bettering ambitions to actually getting people to create the change. Moving from the internal transformation that companies are doing these days, which is a sort of 10, 5, 20% marathon, 10% less plastic, 10% more plastic, whatever it might be. But if you look at a company like IKEA, for example, they've been on a huge transformation internally. But today they have an ambition about obviously getting 1 billion people on this planet to live more sustainably. So their focus has shifted. And if you actually, in fact, look at people's willingness to pay a premium price, you see very much the same pattern. About an average of 29.4% of people are willing to pay more. And this is definitely something I can recognize from Årstiderne, because I'm actually not buying the produce, I'm buying who they can help me become. The fact that Årstiderne have taught me to become a better plant-based chef, that's what I'm buying, that little who. So always ask yourself who you can help your customers become. And in fact, when people talk about outcrying each other or outdoing each other, for those of you who have read, for example, Time and Talk's book, Story Doing, I don't think that's the right approach, because great leadership is, in fact, is not about being a preacher, but about being a coach, always being there for your customers, always making sure that you can answer that one question: how can you create a meaningful difference in people's lives? So for me, great leadership is really to get people to achieve amazing things. And when you meet Ingmar and Mathias in a little while, you will actually see how both of them have had a laser-sharp focus on motivating people to create the change, in believing in people that they can create the much-needed change. And it is needed, not just for the sake of marketing, because people are losing trust in brands. People are losing trust in the way that we approach purpose today. So we need to do something different. And secondly, we're also faced with a huge social and environmental challenge. And for those of you who have not read The Great Acceleration, pick up the book. I won't advise you to do it on a Monday if you're feeling a little bit Monday blue, because it's depressing reading. So we need to understand, how do we motivate people to create the much needed change? And I know that I started with a picture of Jesus, provokingly, to obviously say that enough about this self-glorifying thing. But in fact, if we want to create the much needed change, and the thing that really inspired me to take this new approach in the book, The Hero Trap, was obviously to understand, where does change start? And we are our own biggest barriers to change. So if you as a brand, or if you as a leader want to do something great in the world, the best place to start is with yourself. Because if you can change yourself, you can very much change the world. So that was a little bit of what I had to share with you here today, and how we are moving from a world where it was very much about the why, which is not differentiating anymore, and is moving to the who you can help people become. It's about we unlock sustainable growth. It's about we unlock that gap of the 39% to chart a new path forward for marketing. And I think this is a great opportunity to do so during this very, very challenging time. But as I said, I'm very pleased that we have Ingmar with us here today as well. I have a huge respect for the job that Ingmar have done from We Don't Have Time. So Ingmar, do we have you with us all the way from Stockholm?
Yes, you have. Nice to meet you. Do you hear me?
So hopefully we have Ingmar joining us.
I'm here.
All the way from Stockholm. And so pleased to meet you, Ingmar.
I'm here, but you don't seem to hear me. But I think the guests are hearing me, so I'm proceeding here. Great. So, thanks for a very interesting talk, Thomas, and I agree to a lot of things you're telling the audience, but I have a little bit another perspective on the things, and that is the future of business is not all about what I can do for you. It's more about what we can do together in order to solve climate crisis and solve the problems we have in the world. So I think that if you add another perspective about not just how you could be a climate hero as my customer, but how we could do it together, I think that is the sweet spot of what we need to do here. My name is Ingmar Rentzhog, and I used to work in the finance industry with communication and marketing. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I was running a communication firm within finance, helping a lot of companies to communicate and talk about how fantastic investments they were providing. But 3 years ago, I sold my company and started to work, to dedicate my life to do something about the climate crisis. And our name is We Don't Have Time, and the meaning is that we don't have time to wait. The climate crisis is really, really urgent crisis. And we have a golden opportunity to solve this crisis. But future generation will not have that opportunity. It's only us that are alive here today, that are grown-ups today, that have the ability to do something about it. And the good news is that we have all the solutions needed to actually solve this crisis. We also have enough people willing to act. But the missing part is that we need to connect all those people and have them work together. And that's the mission behind We Don't Have Time. We have built the world's largest social network in order to connect everyone that wants to solve the crisis and have them work together. Individuals, businesses, organizations, governments, everyone needs to work together. And one of the most important climate action we need to take now is actually the communication. Because we will never solve this if we as a few individuals or a few companies are doing everything right. No, if we're not succeeding with influence all the others to follow and do the same, we will fail. So one of the most important climate action individuals, but also businesses can do is communication. If I live a 100% climate friendly life, I do everything right, I don't emit anything, and if I don't influence others to do the same, my action is more or less kind of pointless. And it's the same with companies. If they are doing everything right, but they are failing to communicate that to everyone, we will also fail. So one of the biggest potential many companies have is to start communicating. And if you think of it, many companies are much bigger than countries. I could take one of the biggest example, MasterCard. They have 5 billion customers. What if they were starting to communicate how much carbon emission every transaction their 5 billion customers were buying? If they started to inform about that, that will be a huge climate action they will do. That is just one example. So if you work with communication, you can really do a super important job here. And how to succeed with this is kind of tricky because we need to think differently. It will not work, as Thomas told, that if you tell people you're a hero, but you're not that hero. That will not work. And if you tell people to act, but you're not acting yourself, that will not either work. So we need to change together. And here is something very, very interesting happening. And I will show that by showing this slide. I hope you see my slide here. And that is actually that the purpose of business is starting to change. In US, there's a big organization called the Business Roundtable. All the large companies in the United States are members of this organization. Tim Cook is on the board. Walmart CEO is the president of this organization. And this is an interest organization for companies in the United States. And here is something very interesting. Last year, they changed the purpose of a corporation for the first time. It's no longer about a decision based solely on whether they would yield higher profits for the shareholders. No, now it's rather corporate leaders should take into account all stakeholders. That is employees, customers, and society writ large. So we need to involve the ones we're communicating for in much more way than just two-way communication. We need to involve the stakeholders in the decision on how to build a sustainable future. The brands that are succeeding with that, they are also succeeding with growing their business and attracting the employees that want to work for them and sell their products, and they will be successful. So that is the key. What is not the key is to be this marketing hero, as Thomas was speaking about. This is one example from the biggest newspaper in Sweden this weekend. There was this really, really big climate issue where the newspaper had invited Greta Thunberg to be the chief editor, the guest chief editor. So all the newspaper was all about the climate. And a lot of companies wanted to do ads. And here we have a company doing everything wrong, I would say. They are egoists. They are like Jesus with this selfie stick. They are talking about that they are the most sustainable car brand for the climate. BMW is the best car maker according to the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. They are bragging. They're also using Greta Thunberg's school strike sign and kind of telling them that they are on her side. I will say that this ad is nothing about involving the stakeholders. It's just bragging, and I think this have a terrible effect on all the ones that are engaged for the climate, and it also don't communicate to the ones that don't like the climate movement because they don't like Greta and they don't like the sign. So this is a big fail. What should they have done instead? Should they have not communicated that they are the leader in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index? No, I will not say that. They could communicate that we are, according to Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the best car maker, but we need to improve. We need to do so much more. Please help us. Give us advice on how we can improve even more. Involve your stakeholders. And that is what We Don't Have Time platform is all about. We have built a social network that combine the functionalities of Twitter, that is a social network, with TripAdvisor, that is a review platform where customers at hotels help each other to tell other guests what is a good hotel and what is a bad hotel. We're doing the same thing with the climate, and I'm now going to show you how this is working.
Do you want to act on the climate crisis but don't know how? With our app, you can send climate reviews to organizations and leaders. Our team reaches out to the organization to encourage dialogue. Tap the green Create button and choose type of review. Give climate love to people doing great stuff. Create a climate idea to suggest a solution. Or send a climate warning to those who hurt the planet. To increase your impact, you can share the review, because when enough people agree with you, organizations and leaders will change. Many even want your opinion, because we have to work together. Create your climate review now.
So how this works, you will find our app on App Store and on wedon'thavetime.org. And I'm now going to show you how people are interacting on our platform, because what we have built is something that is helping businesses and organizations to have this stakeholder dialogue and have the communication to be about not bragging what you do, but if you do the action, your customers and your stakeholder, they will brag about that they are your customers, and they will help you amplify your great climate action. So what you will see on our network is a lot of climate reviews, as you saw in the film, climate love for what is good, climate ID if you want to suggest a new idea to someone to implement, and a climate warning if you think something needs to stop. And here you find a lot of marketing, you can say, but it's not the companies that are doing the marketing, it's their stakeholders. Here is someone that giving climate love to Kynningsrud because they have the first electric crawler crane. Here is someone giving climate love to Katerra because they have built a really, really big, large house with the help of wood. Here is someone giving climate love to Volvo Cars because they're not bragging about they're the best car company, but they are actually want the politicians to stop, to forbid, ban petrol cars. BMW are not doing that, but Volvo is doing that. So they will get climate love and people will talk about them. Patagonia, they are telling that they are the solution, but they're also doing a lot of climate action. And what they have been doing here is that they offer to buy secondhand on their stores. So when you go to Patagonia, you don't need to buy the new product. You can buy the secondhand on the same place, etc. Volker's cutting carbon dioxide from crisp production. So you will find thousands of those climate love where people interact and talking about your business if you're doing something, if you're a role model. But not if you communicate it by bragging, but if you're just doing it and letting your stakeholders know that. But it's not all about helping the solutions out there. It's also co-creating new solutions. So here is, for instance, a climate ID to climate and capital media on how about a new form of investment. The reception climate capital media could communicate to all those people that have given this climate ID. So it's a real thing where many stakeholders could communicate it to one leader and they could act. And I would say this is the future of marketing. Involve your stakeholders. And that's also what our partners are doing. So on our platform, you have a lot of companies and organizations that are open for climate dialogue, and they are encouraging their stakeholders to give them climate reviews, help us improve our work for the climate, give us climate love or suggest new ideas or warn against wrongdoings. They involve their stakeholders and they are changing together with them. And they get a lot of engagement from our members, but also from their existing customers, employees, etc. And they are doing the change together. So what our platform is all about, the collective climate action, where you can do things together, where you can change together. And it's not about what I can do for you. It's all about what we can do together. And in order to be someone you trust, you must lead by example. It doesn't work if, for instance, if you're one of the largest asset managers in the world. BlackRock has been communicating a lot about that it's super important that all their investments are invested for the climate and they're doing climate action, or else they will de-invest. Their CEO has made a lot of public statements about this. But in reality, they're not using their voting power. They are actually one of the asset firms that votes at least for climate action. So they don't live as they preach. And that is really, really dangerous to do. You should not preach, but if you preach, you must live up to it. Otherwise, it will backfire in your communication strategy, but it will also backfire for the planet. So what I'm saying here is that we need to change together. Togetherness is the key. And the best communication out there is the communication where you're not telling people what to do, but you show them how you're doing it, and you encourage them to take part in the dialogue and help you succeed. You are not supposed to do the marketing. Your stakeholders is going to help you with that if you are part of the solution and if you work on action instead of bragging. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Ingmar. And this is definitely your time to show a little bit of love. So you can definitely ask Ingmar questions, and Ingmar will be back joining me and Mathias after Mathias from Doconomy have shared his vision as well. And yes, for sure, this is about a collaborative effort. Every little step becomes a big leap for mankind. But we are fast forwarding to Mathias, another one of the great pioneers in this space, who is making climate actions in quite a difficult industry, banking, much, much easier. So Mathias also calling us in all the way from Stockholm. Such a pleasure to seeing you. Mathias, I think the last time we saw each other was actually waterboarding not waterboarding, what is it called? Wakeboarding in Stockholm. Great to see you, Mathias.
Waterboarding, that would have been something else. And I probably wouldn't have been invited. So thank you so much for having me, guys. And what I would like to do is just to share a few slides around Doconomy, what we do and how we try to engage the many people. In one way, similar to what Ingmar just went through in regard of using language, or maybe even creating a language to engage everyone, creating, in our case, not as much a social media platform, but a platform that is already existing, your wallet. So what we aim to do is to create a language for the climate in every transaction, in every wallet. Johan Pihl, my co-founder, once said when we were setting this up, it's like, well, if you're in a car heading for a cliff, where is the best place to be to stop the car? Obviously inside the car. So what we try to do is to get into each and everyone's wallet and presenting the impact of consumption in a very tangible way. But as both Thomas and Ingmar has said, there is no way we at Doconomy can do this on our own. That's why collaboration is so important, engaging everyone, enabling everyone. And it's also necessary not to leave anyone behind. I think it's important to understand that we're coming at this crisis with different levels of knowledge, with different levels of engagement, and with, to be frank, different levels of fears. And in Sweden this week, earlier this week, a children's book, or a book to how to talk to children about the climate crisis, was published. And I think it's a great idea, because if we are to avoid accelerating the crisis of today, we need to educate the consumers of tomorrow to be better equipped than we have been and our parental generation has been in understanding that every action has a reaction. So I'll share with you a few slides around Doconomy, and please, follow Doconomy on LinkedIn or Twitter if you're interested in seeing how we progress. It's been a hell of a ride so far, and it's not slowing down. So bear with me whilst I'm trying to connect my slides here. All right. So now I could easily say the most Well, after I love you and good night, of course, being the most used sentence in the world for the last almost a year now, with the current pandemic in mind. Can you see my screen? It has a strong follow by "Am I on mute?" Anyways, so welcome is the most important word on this slide, because this takes for everyone's ambition. This takes for everyone's action to address the climate crisis we're in. And the way we're doing it at Doconomy is that we're increasing transparency, because I think it's Jean-Paul Sartre who said that once you know and are aware, you can choose to do something, but you can choose to do nothing, but you're still aware. And that's why transparency is so powerful, because transparency fosters engagement, and engagement connects with responsibility. Responsibility engages with actions, and actions has results, and results is exactly what we need to address this crisis. So what we do is we're working around the financial services industry initially, but we've expanded our scope. So we're more of an impact company now, or a climate impact company, than a fintech. And I don't really care what people call us, because what matters at the end of the day is how we help people help everyone else. However, our background is quite diverse. It's from impact consulting, finance, design, communications, tech, you name it. But we all feel it's time that we connect our consumption to its impact on the planet. And it needs to be easy. I'm lazy, you're lazy, we're all lazy. And this needs to be automated. It needs to be done in a very quick fashion and with high relevance. So what we did was we developed the Åland Index to calculate the environmental footprint of each and every transaction you do with your credit card, debit card, on your accounts. And why do we do that? Well, apart from we want people to know and understand, we also, as a second step, want to direct the most powerful force to save the planet. We believe that if it becomes profitable to save the planet would be saved in no time. I think, what's his name, the US runner-up for presidency, said once, if the planet was a bank, it would have been saved already. But actually, he had stolen it in his turn from a guy in Latin America. But with his socialist background, that quote didn't resonate so well. So Bernie Sanders are accredited with it. However, it's true. You know, if we can make it profitable, if we can make it transparent, and if we can engage people around saving the planet, it will be saved in no time. The most powerful force on the earth, with 10 times the investments and military spending, is you and me. It's our consumption. It's what we do every day. It's how we manifest our lifestyle. It's how we reflect in our consumption. So we want to accelerate the demand for impact transparency in financial services. And we want to also provide a digital solution to enable a sustainable lifestyle. Now, a sustainable lifestyle is much wider, of course, than just money. And we have also expanded our scope. Coming back to Thomas Arrow, and I must say thank you very much, guys, for having us on board. And thank you, Thomas, for all the inspiration over the years. This has been a conversation, very inspiring conversation for, I think, 4 to 5 years. First time Thomas reached out around the Åland Index that calculates the methodology we use to enable every bank that wants to engage their clients in this knowledge to calculate the impact on transaction. Thomas reached out and said, guys, this can truly change the whole industry. And I was like, well, we try, but we have quite a distance to go. And he's like, well, I'll be with you on this journey. I will support you if I find things that I think is relevant for you, or if there is things that you would like to run by me as a senior advisor of sorts, just let me know. And to a great extent, Thomas has a big part in this success, and even the making of Doconomy and the many great conversations we've had. So if you think he's just this cool guy on stage talking about branding and sustainability, communications, responsibility, and purpose, okay, he is that as well. but he is also a very committed change maker that we have had a great value of working together with. So thank you, Thomas. Enough of brown nosing now. What we want to do then is we want 500 million people to understand their impact of their consumption. And we want to reduce CO2 emissions with 1 billion ton. So 2 tons per person in a year is our contribution of the effects of transparency in transactions. And the next step would then be climate action, feeding great ideas. We all know that we can't solve today's problems with yesterday's ideas. We need to have ideas for tomorrow. So with those ideas coming into play, they need funding. And where are they going to get funding from? Probably not from the institutions wanting to remain at status quo, making money the way they've always made money, extracting things, burning things, working with strong lobbies. Rather the opposite. These are ideas that needs funding, where brave innovators, change makers are trying out new things, testing new stuff in order to address the crisis that we are all facing. The least we could do is support them with our financial measures. At the end of the day, we are all part of this scheme, this emissions and impact scheme that is affecting the planet so tremendously. And our initial ambition was to make the efficiencies of the financial system, because it's super efficient, because you make a lot of money on it. The efficiencies of the financial system care for the fragilities of the ecosystem. So in short, making it possible to make money on saving the planet will be saved instantly. I'm not saying that it needs to be a way to make money, but it can be. So we want a future-proof life on Earth, and we want to make a sustainable lifestyle possible for all. These are our services today. We're working with the Circle, it's the Dollar Index, enabled to any bank in the world who wants to engage their clients and calculate the footprint. We provide that as an API, cloud-based service. We're now live in the US, Italy, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Ceylon. We have 10 more countries coming. So that's all good. We have an application in Sweden, Do. You can get a Do card in Sweden, connected to your app, and you see all the impact. But you can also offset with no fee. We're not brokering the planet. We're not selling off the planet. We have non-fee direct connect to the projects that are offsetting the carbon rendered. We have the Planet Loyalty Program, which is an opportunity for any brand to calculate the impact on product level. Because if we are to educate around products, we need to label them. There should be a price connecting to your wallet, but also a cost connecting to the planet. And for that to happen, we need to make it possible for SMEs to calculate the impact of their products. We have a few partners. Ingmar actually brought one up, being MasterCard. We're very proud to work with MasterCard and the Priceless Planet Coalition. And as Ingmar pointed out, if we can connect this ability, this transparency tool, to every credit card, to every transaction, we have shaped a standard for creating a language for the planet in every wallet. And, when in many years from now, when I sit down and say, my grandchildren ask me, what did you do? I hope to be able to say that we made a little bit of a difference, and that would be one of them. So thank you very much for listening to the Doconomy story.
Fantastic, Mathias, and what an inspiring story. And I got to say that the first time I came across Mathias was in the early Ålands days, as Mathias mentioned. And I think it's actually also an example of something that started out as an idea, that they worked together with Ålandsbanken, that won lots of prizes in Cannes for whoever that matters something to, and D&AD and globally, and now has turned into a business model much within itself. So really incredible to see how an idea can become such a big and create such a big impact. So congratulations on that journey, Mathias. And now we will have a bit of time for a Q&A session. So Ingmar will be joining us as well, and we will have Mathias. So we are all three here in the room. And we actually have had a couple of questions that I will dive into. but also on the live stream, on Zoom, on LinkedIn. Please use this opportunity to ask questions as well. But anyways, Ingmar and Mathias, welcome back. And I think before we dive into the questions from the audience, it would be great to maybe you both kind of talk about, as one of the red threads here, about how it's about helping, enabling people, companies to create sustainable actions. So what are some of the kind of barriers and what are some of the opportunities that you're witnessing? And maybe Ingmar, if you would kick this off first.
I will say the barriers. It's a lot of people that I know that work kind of high level in many companies that have understood the situation in the world and that are trying to create change within. I really like Mathias' analogy of the only way to stop the car is to be inside it, and it could be really uncomfortable to be inside the car when it's crashing, but it's the only place you could be to avoid the crash. And we can't just protest about the drivers. We need to be the driver and have this car slow down and turn around. Anyway, those people that are working inside companies and want them to invest in climate action, stop building in cement, start building in with trees, etc. I know so many people that try to do this thing inside the car, and they are failing. And the reason for that is that we have a system, an economic system, where you have to motivate everything about how is that making us more profitable in the short term. And it will not make you more profitable. It's much more expensive to build a house in tree with wood. It's much more expensive to invest in fossil-free steel, etc. So most companies, most management team will not approve that kind of thing if they can't motivate it. And that is what I try to help out with by having a review platform, so that people that wants to do those investments inside companies could tell their management that will give us better ratings, that will give us more customers, more investors, and will help us attract more employees if we do these investments. But today we don't have that power, so many of those actions will not be, I mean, instead of investing like 1 billion, they maybe invest 2 million in the goodwill account, but they don't do it for real. And we can't have this, like, we need real actions, and real action costs money, and when we must have the companies pursuing that for their business. So I absolutely agree, we must make it profitable to do climate action. That is the hurdle.
Very good rallying cry there, Ingmar, and I very much agree. I mean, obviously, the whole fight against short-termism, which I think as an industry particular, we are always so obsessed with, next quarter results, etc. So it's very kind of difficult to come out of that vicious circle. And something that you spoke about as well, Mathias, in terms of consumption, in fact, and how that can be a driver for action. I mean, some of the barriers, some of the opportunities that you've seen through your career, Mathias, could you highlight a few of those, please?
I think transparency is the number one. The mindless consumption is, shopping away. I remember one vacation, my parents are divorced, and I was going on vacation with my dad, and he had bought this 12-pack of white socks because it was so cheap. So he was like, why should I wash them when it's only 5 crowns a pair? And I was just a kid, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. That's like J.R. Ewing in Dallas or something. But I mean, today that would just have been embarrassing. And I won't tell my children. I hope they're not watching, because their granddad would fall down in their respect. But I think transparency is extremely important, and we all need a bit of help. And I think Ingmar is onto something really important. If you take we don't have time, and you take the climate crisis and you consider that a journey, then we don't have time becomes like the TripAdvisor of addressing the climate crisis, because it shows what kind of companies that are stepping up to this challenge. And it's using transparency of the many, using transparency of each and every one of us. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing is that we need to change the paradox. You know, there is things that needs to change. And there is one question from Carolina on the Q&A saying, you know, with MasterCard encouraging spending and consumption, isn't that contradictory to the purpose of Doconomy? Yes, it is contradictory to the purpose of Doconomy if it was true. But I don't share that perspective. I don't believe that guns kill people. I believe people kill people. I don't believe that alcohol gets you drunk. I believe that you get you drunk. And if there is a secure way to pay and transact money across the world with seamless and no fees, I think that's a great thing. But my reaction, in all fairness, to Carolina's question was exactly the same. Why would MasterCard do something like this? And I was like, and talking to them and working with them for quite some time now, I must say that to me, they're becoming more of a planet company than a payment company, but they're moving from the social perspective with financial inclusion, making it available to all, to a sustainability inclusion, making sustainability available to all. And that is something that I'm hoping for more banks to engage with, and potentially even Visa and American Express and other payments providers. But there's always someone that needs to lead the way. And the one leading the way will get all the tough questions. And once they have showed it can be done, everyone following is just going to be a natural state of things. That's the way things are. And I think that's pretty cool.
Definitely. I think transparency is one of the things that I think all brands and organizations today have to be able to face. And there was this quote that I picked up from Hannah Jones from Nike at one point, and she said, if you're going to be naked, you better be buff. And I think it really puts an unprecedented pressure on us as an industry to pivot and understand some of these sustainable changes. We've seen it with digital and the slow pace of the change that we've seen our industry adopt some of those changes. And for sure, we'll see that with sustainability as well. We do have a question here, besides the one you mentioned from Carolina. We have one from Maggie, who's a marketing manager at WePly. So thank you so much, Maggie, for asking that. And that is a question to you, Mathias. And her question is, would you say that plug-and-play solutions to impact is the most scalable way?
Plug-and-play solutions to impact. I think distribution is the most important. And for anything to distribute, I think you should make use of existing networks. We are making use of MasterCard's payment network, for example, and banks that we are working with are making use of their existing client networks. So I think in that perspective, plug and play is quite handy, because when you're addressing someone who has a whole big network, they will be very concerned with, you know, tech specs, functionality, integrity, security. And if you have a plug and play solution that works and they can review and they can implement that in every part of their network, I think that facilitates. But I don't think that necessarily every disruptive idea needs to be a plug and play idea. I think rather the opposite, actually, to be contradicting myself. I think the most disruptive ideas are not plug and play initially, because no one had thought of it as a plug and play solution. That's why it's probably disrupting something. So to your point, I think yes, plug and play is needed to be successful and to be a trusted way, because sustainability, if you're changing large corporations or large groups of interest to a more sustainable way, you're picking one fight. So you're picking the sustainability fight, making them less negative impactful. To then also fight for the non-plug and play commodity, I think it's a double battle. And I think I would rather come with a plug and play solution addressing the climate crisis and have the climate crisis conversation than focusing on the plug and play conversation.
A very good point there. And a last little question here before we need to wrap up. So Ingmar, question for you. And I think this is a very good question in these quite challenging time. And the question is really, what are some of the changes that you have observed in terms of responsibility and sustainability on the back or in the midst of what we're experiencing now with COVID-19?
For one thing, digital meetings like this is here to stay, and that will save a lot of emissions. I will also say another thing, and that is contradicting all the airliners out there that telling people that you need to travel to make it smaller. I have never seen a smaller world when we have seen this year. It's so many people talking like meetings like this that is truly international, and that is going to speed up the change in the world. And that's a really good thing because we need to speed up. So I would say the best thing that had happened to the world, the positive effect of the corona, we have so many negative effects, of course, but the positive effect is that the world has been smaller. We travel less, but we communicate more internationally. And we're going to see so much change because of that, because ideas are spreading super fast. And that will have an exponential effect on all kind of innovation and solutions.
Thank you so much, Ingmar and Mathias, for sharing your input. This is just, as you can see, the very beginning of a conversation, definitely a conversation that we will be hearing a lot more to going forward in the world of marketing. I will encourage all of you to go and check out Doconomy, and we don't have time. And obviously, if you want, have a closer look at my book, The Hero Trap, and on the little end line here as well. Do think about, because this is about action, do think about one thing you can take away from what you have heard from Ingmar and Mathias and myself here today that you can adopt in your business tomorrow. So think about one thing, because change just demands one little thing. And thank you, Mathias. Thank you, Ingmar. And I'm just going to wrap it up with saying and introduce Christian for a short little wrap up. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, also on behalf of Danish Marketing Association, I would like to thank you so much to the speakers today, Thomas Kolster, Ingmar, and Mathias in Stockholm, for inspiring us all on the future of purpose and how you create business models that really makes an impact in people's lives and also for the planet. Thanks for watching this final M Talk of 2020. We will continue this series for next year, and until then, take care and see you hopefully soon again.